I'm here with Renzo and Monica Ortega from Two Become Family. And maybe tell us about, we didn't get into this in detail in the show, but what is your apostolate, specifically outreach through social media and stuff?
Our goal with the apostolate, well, so the apostolate itself, it's got a website, tobecomefamily.com, and then we have different social media platforms. On all the different platforms, you go at To Become Family, you'll find what we're doing. But it was inspired by St. John Paul's Writing in Familiaris Consortio. Two lines in there. One where he says, "Family, become what you are," and then a little earlier in the encyclical, he says that I believe he said it's a great work of mercy to restore confidence in marriage and family life. And that's something that we've been aiming to do through the different formats of the apostolate, different content that we create, to be honest about our struggles in marriage and how we've grown, but also shed light in that God's grace is available for all the Catholics who've been married and who possess the sacrament, so that they can go confidently into marriage and not be afraid of it. And then even for young Catholics who are unsure of marriage, to restore confidence in that marriage and family life, that even if they didn't live or weren't exposed to a marriage that was good, that grace is there so that they could have what they never had growing up, that they could have that in the future.
Yeah, and truthfully, it started because we had been doing marriage prep ministry in our diocese, our home diocese, and we've also done youth ministry for a number of years, and many of our former teens were becoming young adults and getting married, and we just wanted to kind of supplement what we were doing for the diocese, give another resource, and then also to share with some of our former teens that have now grown up and gone off. They've moved all over the place, all over the country, to have some conversation starters for them. So just a lot of topics that don't always get discussed out in public. And you kind of wonder how to navigate these situations, whether it's communication or intimacy, sexuality, in-laws, holidays, whatever these things that present themselves in a new marriage, they're not always talked about out in the open, and so you feel isolated sometimes, and you feel like you're trying to navigate them on your own. And we wanted to just provide an avenue of some form of mentorship for the people that we knew, and so that we could start conversations with them and they could start conversations with one another. So really it was to address a local need more so, and it just seemed to resonate with people, so it kind of grew from there.
Yeah. And we try not to have, our episodes and our writings aren't very instruction-based. I think if people want instruction-based, they know where to look and who the right people are, but it's a lot more conversation-based, and our experience is what's worked for us, and then ultimately always pointing them back to the church and Christ, but allowing them to have those conversations and even be flies on the wall with our conversation, so they could see that what integrated marriage looks like, that it's not separate from the life of the church, but also that the life of the church can speak into marriage and really make it better.
Yeah. And sometimes those conversations don't always go articulately or smoothly, and we try to keep that in the way that we write and in the way that we talk on our podcast, that just this is how it is to kind of muddy through some of these things in life.
You tell a really kind of compelling story about what happened during COVID. Talk about that with the young people and the experience of not being able to meet with them, right?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, so during COVID, we saw this particularly in youth ministry. That
because we're in New England too.
Yes, so we are in New England. We're based out of New England. So so with the shutdowns and schools closing and sports teams and pretty much anything social for the teens, they were closed. Those options were closed to them for quite some time, and therefore also youth ministry. Youth ministry had to go virtual. So we met online through Zoom, and we tried to have meetings, but of course there's nothing can replace that live social interactions. And
they got to a point they were tired of screens, because
that's true too.
They were doing all their classes through screens and all their homework, everything. And so to do another meeting virtually was just too much for them.
Yeah. But one of the things that we saw that was so hard for us on the the other side was they were so engrossed in social media. That was their way of keeping in contact with one another, but then also the greater world. So many opinions about COVID and the reactions to COVID and what's right and what's wrong as far as shutdowns and vaccinations. And then we added
anything political.
Yeah, and then added a presidential election to that time frame. And you have these young teens who, most of them aren't old enough to vote yet and are still developing their worldview and their sense of morality and where they fit in the world and things. So they were getting so many messages.
Well, and it's funny because it's only 4 years ago, but the messages that they were getting were from secular culture and very anti-Catholic and distorting what the Catholic Church actually teaches. And I don't think at that point we had the amount of Catholic content creators we have now.
That's true, yeah.
That were speaking a counter message to that.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of what does the church actually teach out there that they could
Yes.
even find.
Yes, so we had many teens decide to leave the church and leave youth ministry because they had heard what, I'm doing air quotes right now, but this is podcast so you can't see, but what they had heard that the church teaches, and it seemed so, it seemed antiquated, but it also seemed lacking compassion. It lacked social awareness and social justice, and so much we just wanted to scream, like, come back, let's have a conversation about this, let's talk about this, and let's really go into what you're hearing and what you're learning and what's true and what's real and what things are lies. And so it was a tough time in ministry,
and
that's for sure.
It's amazing because it required, I think the antidote to that besides speaking truth was to accompany them through their struggles, and we were unable to because of the lockdowns and the shutdowns.
Right.
And as much as we could reach out via text or something, there was nothing that could make up for the in-person time to really share the gospel with them.
Right. Yeah, to me it was striking when you were first telling me that if you turn young people over to the culture, they're not going to come out Catholic.
No.
They're going to come out with the values of the world. Now you all have a real missionary heart. You said you like going to your geographical parish, you're not kind of church hunting, and because you want to be there amongst people there and witness. Talk about what drives that in you, or is that just a feeling of a calling? Because sometimes we all can like to be around like-minded people and be encouraged by that. Maybe we need the encouragement, but you guys are going to the Far East here, right?
Yeah. It's funny. I think since very stereotypical of having a conversion, as soon as I realized that Christ is real and everything the church teaches is real, we were both really bit with the bug to share it, and we wanted to share it with whomever we could. I think we got to the point that we were very
our pendulum may have swung a little too far.
we were like obnoxious converts. Everyone knew we were converts or reverts, and
you had a lot of Jesus T-shirts.
I had a lot of Jesus T-shirts, but we had a big conviction of we wanted to share the gospel, and because we believe it, it provides freedom. It provides what people are looking for, like the cross-shaped hole in your heart is filled by Christ. Like there's all of that we believe, and then I think. Right now, we're in a day and age where, because people want to be close to Christ and close to the truth, they kind of tend to seek where it feeds them, and they're concerned about how am I being fed, how are my children being fed. I want to grow in faith, but also they forget that your faith is given to you also so that you could share with others and be able to transform others' lives. And so the gospel is meant to be shared, not just to be held in for yourself for your own transformation. Like it's a both and. And I see a lot of, and I love the idea of the Benedict option, but also I want a Benedict option so that we can become stronger, so that we can go out and transform the world. And I've always been convicted of that, sometimes to a fault, to the point that I did it poorly and I was rude. I'm sorry for all the people that are listening if I was rude to you, but we really believe that the power of the gospel can transform lives, and it doesn't matter if what age demographic is being preached to, or where people are at when they're hearing it for the first time. So that's why even at our home parish, we still believe that the gospel can still transform the parish. It doesn't have to be set at a particular place, but like, no, here, roots can sink here, and then Christ can move here, and the Holy Spirit is active. People just need to say yes and be willing to kind of give of themselves. And I think that's where a lot of our conviction comes from.
I think too, I think there's something very good and important about having like a home in the church. And if we're always searching for the spirituality or the charism or the way that this place can feed me and can take care of me, then I'm not fully acting as family, and I'm not fully acting as home. Like, we are called to not only be cared for, but to care for others. And so I think that it's important to give to your home, like to give back to your home, to give to the parish that is close to your physical home, but so that your community can become a home, and your church family can become a home, and that you give your gifts and you receive the gifts of those that are around you. And it just, I don't know, I think it's important for your children to grow up around people, like you said, like-minded, but are also different. And I think that that's good, that we're all here to worship Christ, and then we do that in this way because that's what works for our whole family.
Yeah.
And we also recognize that we I don't want to say we have a gift for sharing. I think we're in the right place, and God has given us the right people around us for us to be able to share. And some people may give back to the parish monetarily,
Sure,
but they give their gifts and talents, and I would hate to give our gifts and talents to do things outside of our church but never do it inside.
yes.
So we try to make sure that if we're in the right positions and people ask us, we will get involved. And a lot of the work we do within our parish is also volunteer. So when we're doing the pre-K, we're volunteering to do that. If they want us to do something with religious ed or give talks, like, we'll do that because we want to be able to give back to the parish.
And I know on the show we mentioned about Pope Benedict speaking so eloquently. I'm sure he's not the only one, but just the witness of the family and its role in proclaiming the gospel just through the family's existence. It's a beautiful image of testimony to the power of the gospel, right? You see two people in love, right? That's God. Right? There's there. Where love is, there's God. But what kind of comments do you get? I imagine you get some nice comments.
No,
Oh,
it's
at
hard
church?
to get them. It's really hard when you get them.
It is hard to receive. We have a very gracious and inviting community, and the other families, especially like the daily mass old ladies, they love our children so well, and they're so patient with their interruptions and their noises and their silliness. But you know what, it's wild because families are it's no secret that families are fracturing at a rate much more quickly than anyone would like. And so when they see a family, when people at church, anywhere really, at the grocery store, anywhere, sees a family that is joyfully spending time with one another, doing just what they're doing, whether it's worshiping at Mass or, like I said, grocery shopping, cheering for a brother or sister at a game, they can see that there is something different when you are living your life joyfully, when you're living as a family joyfully, and loving one another well and serving one another well. Not perfectly, absolutely imperfectly, but just seeming to try in that direction, right? And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the kind comments that people say. It's nice. But I also sometimes I feel for the families that they see and they're like, I could never have 5 children, or I could never do what you do. And I just I want to shout and hug at the same time, like, you absolutely can, because I'm not doing anything. This is just me loving my family and like living through the grace of the sacrament. It is not me.
It's like when Jesus talks to the woman at the well and says, like, if you knew the gift of God. I kind of feel like that when people put a lot on, like, oh, you guys are raising them so well, there seem to be, you guys are so happy, you have so many kids, and you seem to balance it so well. It's not us at all. It is absolutely grace. Because they'll say that even after, and sometimes it's after the kids have had terrible tantrums in Mass, and they got up 3 or 4 times during the homily, and I had to take them, and it was a struggle. And then they come and oh, you guys did so great. And it was like, this was a work of grace. It was not, our gifts and talents, but it was us just cooperating and saying yes in this moment to be here and to try to do this well with our children. Yeah.
There's something that God can do with willingness, right? Mm-hmm. That he can take your willingness.
Or the willingness to be willing.
The willingness to be willing, right? I want to do this well. And I think that if you give that to God and you just show up and you're like, you just show up to Mass and you just come as your family and you say, I'm here. I think that he can do great things with that, right? And
is there one nice comment that you heard that touched you?
Oh, the ones where there's some where people will say things like, wow, they had a lot of wiggles, but you seem to still love them in that, like that. I don't try to stop them from being kids. Like they are children, so they are not going to sit like adults in Mass, right? And so I'm not going to remove them because they can't sit still for an hour. Like that we're gonna, obviously tantrums, we'll excuse ourselves and calm down, but I appreciate when people notice that I'm trying to love my children where they're at and not try to make them, like Mass robots.
I always think too that we could take a break. Do you need to fix
Oh, no,
she just keeps hitting the cord. I'm like, I don't know, that's going to mess up the audio.
I'm good. I'll keep my hands down.
I can't see. I feel like too, like this whole question about gay marriage and everything. You felt like if more people were living marriage well, it wouldn't even be a question. It's like these are not the same things. To say 2 men together, 2 women together, and personally, sometimes what I feel is like you see someone in the lifestyle. I feel like God wants more for you. It's like you're settling for something less. It's just like 2 of the same instead of the richness of this complementary differences that can call a deeper masculinity, like you all spoke of earlier. Like calls a masculinity out of you and femininity out of Monica and Renzo. But so there's a richness there, right? Yeah. That's part of the plan of God. And you bring that together, there's this fruitfulness. There's children, there's life. And it just seems like we're confused because we're not living it enough, And I think even help young people find their masculinity or femininity. I know, Monica, you spoke about like how motherhood like physically changes you, and there's the pain of childbirth and all this kind of stuff. That it's very real what the feminine gifts are here, and distinctive abilities and roles and stuff. But part of your story of witness, maybe is that you all grew up in this culture as well as everybody else.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you didn't have perfect backgrounds, right?
No.
You had but you all are married, having kids, and doing fine now. Right?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I think in kind of piggybacking off of what you said about if marriages were thriving, you could then point to and be like, whatever you have, it's not that. And I think at this point in our culture, marriages are so holy marriages that make you reconsider life's priorities aren't as evident anymore.
Right.
And not saying that we're nowhere near saints, but like if you had, it reminds me of a story Peter Crave told about priests going to a bishop and saying, how can we increase vocations in this diocese? Or the bishop asking the priest, how can we increase vocation in the diocese? And the priest say to the bishop, your canonization. And I think if we were able to live holy, saintly marriages, that's going to transform how the world sees marriage. And that's one of the things we've talked about before is that we're a lot of us are eager to speak the truth in love to those that need to hear it, but we should also, kind of walk the talk and show that this is what Christ can do.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately like what happened to us is we came from very different backgrounds. We weren't as culturally Catholic as our families were. We weren't transformed by Christ, and even down paths that weren't going to lead to any great things. But then once Jesus entered the picture, we were so transformed that we couldn't help but live this way and really give our lives completely to that. And I think that is what, that's what makes people reconsider, like, you're living differently. Why are you living differently?
Yeah.
And then now that's grown into our marriage of even just having 5 kids is a sign of like, why do you have so many?
Yeah.
Why aren't you angry all the time at them? Right? Why are you bringing them to mass even though it's so difficult? Why are you homeschooling right now? And not saying that everyone has to do exactly what we're doing, but embracing the reality of family life, I think, makes a difference, especially now where culture doesn't think marriage or family is necessary, right? That it's a superfluous thing. That's not something that you need to strive for. To see couples striving for good, holy marriages, I think, is very countercultural.
And I think it's so important to not just be living the way you think you're supposed to be living because you think you're supposed to be living that way, but to live your life and enjoy your life. That is noticeable by others, that like I might be having a difficult time. The toddler is wiggling around in my arms, but I'm still going to like embrace him, and I'm going to kiss him, and I'm going to smile at him when he does do something silly. Or marriages that that have a friendship as their foundation, and that you enjoy your spouse, you like spending time with them, and others can see that because you joke or you giggle or you compliment one another or what have you. There's these different little ways to enjoy your life, and that is a gift from the Lord too, right? Like if you are really living the truth of the gospel, you will have joy in your life, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're really believing that. So allow that into your day, allow that into your marriage and into your family life. And I think that is peculiar to others too, that like you just seem...
And you see that in the lives of the saints where like they can go through intense suffering and still have experience joy, and like St. Paul talks about it, like a joy beyond all understanding, like that's, or peace beyond all understanding, like they have this joy and peace about them that's different, and that's something we pray for and try to have as we parent 5 children.
I think one thing that helps, because a couple Christmases ago, a friend of mine gave me this, it's kind of like I call it like an artisan style. It's like this kind of rough wood frame, and it's this in script, it says, enjoy the moment. And so it's something you hang on the wall. And when I first got it, I said, I don't need another piece of artwork. And my office is jammed full of stuff. And I thought, especially something so, I don't know, empty as this. But then I thought, later, this is very deep. Because at the time, I was kind of struggling with, because you're always like worried about this. Well, you got to put out the next fire. You got this next thing to do. And it's like, I'm never in the moment. Because I felt like, I described it to someone, it's like, I feel like my life was like slipping out of my fingers. It's like I didn't have control of it. And even like to trust God, because people, talk about, I trust God. I've turned my life over to God. It's like, I really don't even know what you're talking about, because it's like, I mean, do you really trust God if you have this horrible cancer or you see a loved one get horrible cancer? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to make this profession that I just trust God without qualification? But I can trust God in the moment. Like right now, I can trust him in the present moment.
Right.
And then I can have some peace and joy. If I can enjoy this moment, I can trust that God's here. I love this story. Father Augustine tells. He was early on in formation. He's wrestling with the call to celibacy. He's not yet made final vows. And he's going to leave. He's going to stay. Going to leave. He's Benedictine. He goes to his spiritual director. He says, I've had it. I think I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave. And the director says, well, are you going to leave right now? He said, no, I'll I'm going to be here today. And he said, well, go back to your cell and be the best brother you can be today. Right? And basically just string those along, and just focus on this present moment, enjoying your life. And that is, we miss the greatness, the goodness that's in our lives, as you said.
Oh my goodness.
And that's-
My girls group, I have a group of friends and we get together. And we either do a Bible study, we read books, what have you. But one of the things that we have been reminding ourselves of, I don't remember which friend said this first, but that I have to stop saying, we'll have a fresh start tomorrow. Like the day is going awry and, everything's falling apart and like tomorrow will be better. Uh-huh. How about right now can be better?
Yeah.
Right. And not wait for that next thing, like not wait for tomorrow or when the schedule settles down or we get that new promotion or like, let's not wait for that, but like, let's start fresh right now and have this moment right now. And that's been one of our things we've been reminding each other of.
Yeah, the story you just told reminds me of what the in the military. A friend of ours just graduated Ranger School, and I asked him like how difficult was it, and they said one of the advice that they gave him was when he felt like quitting, to say to yourself, I'll quit tomorrow, but for today I'm here, I'm gonna do it. And then he's like, and then when tomorrow comes, it's gonna be easier. But you'll feel like you still want to quit, so you're like, all right, I'll quit tomorrow, and you just, like you said, keep stringing it along, and then that makes you be present because I'm going to quit tomorrow, but for right now, I'm here, I'm embracing it. Yeah, right. This is what I got to do.
Yeah. And speaking about that witness, and I think, in some ways, I feel like it's like shooting fish in a barrel because what does the culture have to offer us, right? It's like it dazzles us with some celebrities and. Even Jim Carrey, I think, said he wishes everybody could have like wealth and popularity, celebrity for a day, just to find out it's not what you think it is, right? Yeah. And I feel like Satan's like working like the devil to don't look over here, right? Because these are, and I think about this like with preaching too. Just get this fundamental truths of the gospel there, the passage for today. And get that out there because it seems simple or something, but it strikes people's hearts, and it's like the stuff we see in media and all this isn't real. And there's a new favorite quote I heard recently. I heard it at Seek. It said that the truth is like a lion. You just have to unleash it because it can defend itself. I just love that image of like this lion going through the Serengeti, and he's not afraid of anything. He's going to go where he wants. He's going to do what he wants. And it's like, just get that truth out there, and the witness of the family, the witness of the gospel. But let me ask you, you all are from Newtown, and that's where the Sandy Hook School was. And this terrible tragedy, these young kids were shot up in a classroom, and where do you see like God at work there in Sandy Hook today, or in this community? Yeah,
well, God was definitely at work by having such a strong Catholic community within the community, and then providing the right leadership for that time and for that season that can really gather people together and is willing to make the sacraments available, make themselves available. Like we definitely had. That community had shepherds that were willing to lay their life down for their sheep and be present to them and present to so many families that needed it, and then that's and with that kind of thing, I don't know if you'll see all the fruit that'll bear until years down the line when people realize like how present the priests were. I think those kind of situations really show why we need priests, right? Because I know from just anecdotally, like the priests were at people's houses and spending time with people and going through funerals and just really being present, and then from there really making sure that there was ministries that were available for the people that needed it, and different, and then maybe that they weren't even in personally involved with the tragedy in any way, but because we're part of a strong community, they were affected. Providing ways for ministries to be able to reach people so that Christ could reach them, and ultimately always pointing back to Jesus. And we were blessed to be part of a community that could do that. And then down the line, like you fast forward 11 years, you still see that the community is still strong Catholic, the Catholic community is still strong, and that people, when tragedy came about, Christ was there so that they didn't turn their back on the church.
Mhm.
Right? People are still Catholic, they're still there, they're still committed, and that will allow for any future healing needs to happen to be there, right? Like that door is not closed to faith
Right.
because of a tragedy.
Yeah. And you all, it's part of your own story about having a powerful experience around the sacraments. Monica, yours was confession, and Renzo, adoration. And talking about the strength or power of the sacraments of the church, tell us about your experiences in that with confession.
Sure. I think, so for me, I had spent a lot of time away from Christ's mercy prior to this experience, and the way that the retreat was set up really encouraged confession. I had like this negative impression of the sacrament, that it was kind of your way of highlighting how badly you've been behaving, and like how much you've screwed up, and instead of the invitation for healing, mm-hmm. and the invitation to start anew and to be transformed by grace. So I had that perception be challenged throughout the weekend, and was able to see and speak with a wonderful priest again, these men that are the face of Jesus for you in these times. Just sit with me and like let me talk and share. And he listened, and you could just tell by his face that he felt compassion, and answered some questions that I had, like challenges of why is this really so bad, and met that with like, okay, good question, and didn't shame me for doubting or wondering, and that helped restore my soul back to good relationship with the Lord, and from there I've been able to reframe that sacrament for myself with Jesus, and seek his mercy more frequently and more readily and enthusiastically, I guess.
Do you think you were looking for like a real answer, like why is this so bad, or were you just looking kind of for an encouragement or a acceptance? Or...
probably both, depending on what the challenge was. I had some questions about like honoring your mother and father when things are hard at home, and like things aren't rightly ordered. How do I do that well, and things like that. And if I'm going to try to start, really living my faith, but I have, people in my home that might be opposed to that, like. Yeah. How do you still honor? And so I think I was really looking for guidance for some of that. And then for others, I think, like please, it was almost like a cry for like, please don't pat me on the back and like say that like, oh, it was okay, like you didn't understand. Like, no, you're called to more, and you're called to better. And I appreciated that, like that loving challenge of, okay, now you do have a fresh start. But let's repent, right? Like there has to be some repentance and some change here. So I think it was a mixed bag, and so praise be to God that priest was ready to deal with all of that, I guess. Yeah.
And for you, Renzo, adoration was a powerful moment.
Yeah, it was Eucharistic adoration. I had been an altar server, so I'd served at adorations before, and I guess I knew intellectually what the church taught about Christ being truly present in the Eucharist, but I'd never, I never took it seriously and never experienced it in a way that compelled me enough to actually understand or believe it. Not understand it. I don't think I could ever understand it, but believe it in such a powerful way. And then, but at the conference, the speaker, the host, kind of led into adoration, explaining about the Holy of Holies and how only the priest was allowed to go in, and Old Testament, and now Christ has come to us, and he's truly present on the altar, and he's accessible to us, for all of us to experience him and see him and worship him. And then the holy hour was, the prayer all happened in a way that was very compelling. But then I definitely know that it wasn't just an emotional experience. It wasn't like I knew Jesus. I know that there's a saying of like you knew Jesus intellectually and then you know him in your heart, but it was definitely a ascending beyond that, where I knew within myself, like, this is Jesus and this is true and I am loved. And all of those thoughts hit me right at once. And the emotions came up because it's as if my body couldn't handle that reality of like, this is how loved you are.
Couldn't contain it.
Right. It couldn't contain it. But like, this is how present Christ is right now. Because I don't know where it is in the Bible, or I don't even know if it's in the Bible, but the idea that if God were to reveal himself fully to us right now, like, we wouldn't be able to stand,
Right.
and we wouldn't, and that's the closest thing I could relate it to of Christ revealing himself in a way that I was just, it was too much for me, but at the same time, this is exactly what I needed. And that convicted me so much of like, this is, and then just realizing like, despite being a sinner, I had already gone to confession the night before, but despite all my sins and all my failings and where I was in my life and how I had been acting, that he still deeply loved me. That was the beginning of healing that didn't take place for years, but it was the beginning, and it was him really pursuing me and drawing me closer to him. And I just remember that just being completely life-changing, because my trajectory of my life just completely altered after that, and I was in pursuit of him after.
Wow. Oh, yeah, God's at work. He's present there in that confession. We were talking about Bishop Barron earlier, and he heard him say a quote recently that really struck me. That he was talking about in Exodus, about the burning bush and how God spoke to Moses there, and that the bush was on fire but was not consumed. And Moses is wondering at this marvel, and he draws closer. And he was making the connection that grace builds on nature, and that when we come close to God, there's, in our humanity, there's this luminescence, there's this wondrous transformation, there's this beauty. I was thinking even more broadly, like when we see something beautiful like a sunset or something out of nature, we feel like this is like an encounter with God. It makes us think of God. It's like God is close to this place or this what's happening, and it luminesces. I just love that. And you made me think about it today, like with marriage. That marriage is instituted by God. We see it in the Garden of Eden. Jesus raises it to the dignity of a sacrament. He's drawing close to this. He's present there. And what do you think, like your faith, the sacrament, has brought to marriage? Two people come together, love each other, to have kids. What does the faith do with that?
Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like to really do the marriage thing, like the thing that you want, it's impossible to do that humanly. Like, it is a supernatural thing to be able to bring two completely unique and different individuals, join them to make them one. Right? Like, that is the new reality of this, like, unique individualness but oneness. And to have that be done well, I just cannot do that. Like, I could not, and you could not, and we are just too imperfect to have that be done well, right? And we see that in the creation of children, where you're like, there's no possible way we could have come up with that ourselves. And here is this whole other third human who is a little bit of you and a little bit of me and a little bit of neither of us and a little bit of a combination of us. And you're just like, this is just too magnificent to be done by two humans. And so it's like, well, where's the answer to that? Like, where is that? And that is in our faith. And, you spoke about, Renzo, healing, that, like, those are things that we are incapable of fully doing that ourselves, like bringing ourselves from woundedness to freedom. And through the sacrament, like bringing those wounds out and helping to heal one another. That's not actually us healing one another, but that's the grace through our life and our gifts to one another that are doing that.
I don't know what speaker I've heard say this, but that marriage isn't natural, it's supernatural. And there's a big, and I would argue that's a big reason why marriage is so out of it's out of popularity now, because so much of how our society functions is very naturalistic and very atheistic, and so marriage doesn't make sense. Like, why would you want to be just with one person forever when I could live my life however I want and be with however many I want, and I don't need to commit, and I don't need, don't have to have children anymore, and that's because marriage isn't just a natural thing, but it's a supernatural thing that God designed us to be united in this way. And our faith recontextualizes the whole idea of marriage into realizing it's grander.
Yeah, you think about it, like some form of marriage, and it might be very distorted, like in all these cultures throughout man's history. But Jesus really came and purified it, right? He talks about Moses allowing for divorce due to the hardness of your hearts, and he redeems it to say, no, this is possible to have a permanent bond, and to be faithful, and by his grace, and so much so that he makes it a sacrament of his love for the church. When you think about that, I mean, you're participating in Jesus laying down his life for the church, is saving, redeeming the church, and the bond there that the Son of God makes with humanity, right?
And redeeming it by entering into the world through family, right? And through having a father and mother, and living in the Holy Family. And you speak about this grandeur, but also their simplicity, right? Their hidden life for years together with one another. He redeems family life. He redeems like normal, mundane family life by entering into that.
Yeah. And I think I really wanted to say that in the show, because I just heard that, it was St. Francis de Sales. We just had his feast day, and we've got this one reading we read every year in the office that always strikes me. And he talks about true devotion. It's silly to think that, like a mother could pray like she's in a cloister, or that a husband doesn't have to have a little concern as for making money as like a Carthusian monk or something. It's like ridiculous. It's like, and that, that we're called in our vocations and following that it's going to be a path to holiness. We live it well. So those acts of marriage, of living out your vocation and the mundane, is a path to holiness. And you're not in adoration praying for the sacrament at that moment, but the things you're doing is building the kingdom.
Right.
Yes. Now, one more point I wanted to ask Renzo. You mentioned. Too, we should say, and we said this on the show, but both your parents were divorced, and different issues within the family there. So, you are coming out of this culture to do this, right? To get married and to live this well. So, you have the experience and the scars, right, to show that. So I think that's important to get that out there on this podcast too. But I want to ask you, Renzo, your family's, you immigrated to this country. You were 3 years old from Peru. Yeah. And it gave you an esteem for America. You're back, you grew up about an hour and a half outside of New York City.
Yes. Yep.
And I love New York. It's kind of an image for me of all of America, and the people that have come, immigrants, and made a life for themselves and everything. It shows kind of what America does well, right? Yeah. You can turn things around in less than a generation usually. Yeah. And but tell me about that.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't know if I've ever thanked my parents for this for the sacrifice. Because imagine like Monica and I, let's just move to a different country that we don't know the language and figure out a way to succeed within a generation. Yeah. And not just succeed by monetarily, but be able to put our children through things. Like my parents moved here and they had no idea how to speak English. They had one relative that lived in the United States, and that they stayed with it was my uncle. They stayed with my uncle. And my mom was a housekeeper at a hotel. My dad was a housekeeper at a hotel. And just stereotypically, you go to a hotel and you see the Hispanic housekeepers, and those were my parents, and they were committed to giving me the best life I could possibly have. And they decided, and they knew it in Peru where they were, and that and people in Peru had talked about the United States, like that's where you can make it, that's where you can you could change your generations, you could build a great life for your children. So they emigrated here, and they had to really just grind and do the dirty work. They had to clean hotels and learn English, and my mom took English classes. And in Peru, she had graduated with a bachelor's in business administration, I believe, and she couldn't use that degree. Like, she had come to a new country where her degree was worthless, and she had to really build her way up. And thanks be to God, she came to the United States because the United States provided that opportunity for her, right? So now I'm a product of that hard work. She put me through her and my dad put me through Catholic school. Through most of my life, he worked as a security guard at night. That was like his main source of work. And my mom worked her way up through the hotel business, and now she's like a director of sales at a very good hotel chain in Connecticut. And they were so committed to getting me and then my brother through elementary school, through high school, through college, so that we could have a better life than they did. And then, now I'm able to, I got my bachelor's, I have a master's degree, and, I have a house, I have kids. And a lot of that was because they sacrificed so much of their lives. They sacrificed so much of their comfort, but they also came to a country that like, they didn't come into the country thinking like, oh, the chips are against us. Like, they saw this as like a challenge of this is a land of opportunity.
Right.
And because of the opportunity, like, we're here and we're going to go for it. And you can see the pride isn't the right word, but they're very happy with what they were able to do when they come and they see our family and see our kids, and like, okay, like, all our sacrifice was worth it. And again, like, this is 30 something years of sacrifice that I can't imagine how difficult that was. But I'm grateful they did it. And I'm grateful again and it makes me very proud to live in the United States and be American, and our kids live in a place where this is possible. And that's something I will defend to anyone, because I'm a product of what is possible if you go for it.
Yeah. And I've heard some immigrants talk about too, like, how they had to honor that witness.
Yeah.
Like the sacrifice they made to have it in your life as well. And is there some aspect of their faith that really, like, I think of my father, he passed away from cancer, but I remember it was like unthinkable not to go to Mass. I mean, that was just like an absolute given. And I didn't know my faith well, but I remember I got to college and I just thought, every denomination, doesn't everybody go to church on Sunday? What are you guys doing? And I think that carried me a long way, in my not knowing the faith well, but it kept me connected to the church, in some way. And
they definitely, growing up, they were super strict about Mass every single Sunday. And they got me through Catholic school, but I used to fight kicking and screaming to go to Mass. And then after my conversion, when I became very serious about Mass, they stopped going. They're like, oh, you can do it yourself. You can take yourself there. And now, and they see it that way too. They're very happy that I'm so involved with anything related to the faith. And they support it. And they're just happy that I do it, and they see it as a good thing. But, I still pray that one day, their hearts will soften. And I do believe, and even I hope they're listening to this. I do believe a lot of it is because of a fear of the sins that they have, and not being afraid of encountering that mercy and having to kind of reconcile that. And I hope that I pray that they see the goodness that I'm talking about is real, and that Christ desires to be close to them, and there's a lot of goodness there for them. There's no shame. There's in that Christ takes that from you and gives you a new heart. But as soon as they realized that I was taking it seriously, they're like, okay, job's done. And then they kind of stepped away.
Yeah.
But culturally, though, they knew it was a good, so they made sure to instill that in me.
Yeah. And I've come to appreciate that more as a priest. I mean, you hear it in the culture all the time. You Christians are judgmental, and the implication is they don't want to go and be judged. And I've gotten to be more sympathetic to that. That we do have to be careful of when people are coming back, not to be encouraging and everything. And I remember going to a tough old school confessor, and I after a while though I thought, I'm not going to let anybody, keep me away from confession.
Yeah.
If I'm
Yeah.
afraid of this guy, I mean, I love it. He was just a good man and everything, but just his style was old school.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, sometimes I tell people that too. It's like, don't let any personality stand in your way. I mean, this gift is too good.
Yeah.
If you have to stiff on the guy, you go in there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, well, thank you so much for chatting with us. It was a great show and good to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
It was
This
great
is-
spending the day with you.
The whole
today.
day was great.
Yeah.
This whole experience was awesome. Thank you, Father.